Hello and welcome to tonight's Empower Hour, brought to you by Empower Our Future. My name is Mary Pettigrew, and I'm a member of the Empower Our Future communications team. I will now read uh, the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge, with respect, as non-native people, that the land on which we stand, live, and learn is the traditional territory of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples. Let us seek to understand what it means to be in right relationship today with the traditional stewards of this land and with this land itself and with all the creatures that inhabit it. And now let me introduce our guest. Jonathan Singer is the Senior Director of Policy Programs at the Boulder Chamber of Commerce. Prior to this, he served in the Colorado State House for 9 years, representing Longmont and Northern Boulder County. He chaired numerous committees, including the Public Health and Human Services Committee, as well as the treatment of persons with mental health disorders in the Criminal Justice System Committee and the Joint Technology Committee. As our representative, Singer has played a role in efforts to expand options for child welfare and mental health services, provide assistance to disaster victims, and create a safe, regulated cannabis industry. Before becoming a legislator, he worked with most vulnerable families, most recently with Child Protection and Family Services in Boulder County. In his spare time, he teaches social work at MSU Denver. Thank you again, Jonathan, for being our guest and all your excellent work in past as well. Jonathan Singer, go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you, and thank you for everyone for being here, and all. And really, I appreciate everyone's time for really sharing this on another windy day. It's probably a good day to be indoors for at least a short period of time. But I want to do a little bit of level setting before we go into our first slide. And really, that level setting sits around one major thing. What is the Boulder Chamber? A lot of people think of it as a small group. A lot of people think of it as a corporate business group. The truth is that it is comprised of over 1,300 members. It's the second biggest chamber in the state by membership. We are not the second biggest city in the state by any stretch of the imagination. And so we have a real diverse array of businesses, ranging from your sole proprietors that are just trying to start out and eke out an existence, to larger entities like the Boulder Valley School District and Google, to as luck would have it, Xcel Energy. And so our responsibility is to be responsive to all of our members, regardless of size, to be able to ensure that we have an ecosystem that works for the entire community as best as possible. And so that puts us in a very unique position of being able to be a mediator, an arbiter, a communication conduit for businesses and Xcel, especially in this auspicious time that we just experienced actually this weekend. So with that being said, for those of you who want to spend more time with me, with us, with the Boulder Chamber, I'll certainly in the chat put my contact information, including my cell phone number, to make sure that anything that isn't covered today, we can keep those conversations going. And of course, for anyone who wants to come to any of our events, we have a lot of those that are open to the public. And for anyone who wants to join the Boulder Chamber and understand a little bit more about what we're doing and what we're all about, it goes beyond just any one single topic. So I'm going to start with this. When the power goes out, the economy pays attention. If you didn't see our own report coming out of our Economic Vitality Department and our Boulder Economic Council, we surveyed businesses after the power safety shut off last year and said, what, if you could total up the fiscal cost of what happened, What would that look like? We heard a range, but that range was pretty significant, and on average, we were hearing about 25 to $50,000 losses. That is unacceptable. And that doesn't even cover the potential human toll that we were seeing as well. When we interacted with our city partners and had conversations around this, even the business community understood the first goal is preservation of life. If that necessitates a power safety shutoff in the short term, that's understandable. And as lines are being re-energized, as much as restaurants are hurting, or especially your small businesses are hurting that are dependent, we also understand that nursing homes and other supervised healthcare facilities take first priority. And so, with this being the current reality, not necessarily the permanent reality, but this being the current reality, this is something that we have reached out to our members now time and again on to get critical, constructive feedback and make sure that is provided back to the city and back to Xcel. The other thing is that as we move on, is that here's where some of our advocacy priorities lie. We, being mostly me right now, are at the state capitol talking about wildfire risk reduction, advocating to ensure that our state and our county work closely together, to be able to prioritize those things. And our Boulder Chamber actually supported the tax increase on wildfire mitigation as well as emergency services personnel. So you had an organization that's pro-business, but also pro-tax when it's in the right place, providing for the right thing. And I'll give you the one piece of feedback that really drove it home for us on the wildfire risk reduction. It was actually from the insurance industry. And they are going, unless you take concrete steps on wildfire risk, what you are risking on the back end is insurance companies refusing to cover folks statewide. And so this is a reality. The second thing is, what can we do in terms of business continuity? And I'm going to get into that a little bit later. And then the last is demanding accountability and transparency. And that is across the board. That is from our partners in the city, in the county, at Xcel, at the state, at the Public Utilities Commission, to find out, to get to the right answers. And so, with that being said, the first thing that we focused on is we said, look, we need to fix communication. This is a short-term fix for the long term. So if you remember during the first power safety shutoff, maps were not always as accurate. We weren't getting as fast real-time updates. The communication lines were a little bit disjointed or even significantly disjointed in certain circumstances where the people on the ground that were re-energizing the lines or identifying where down power lines weren't getting the right information to the right places quickly and accurately. Knowledge is power, but knowledge is also about public safety and our economic well-being. And so now there are a much stronger line and chain of communication between the city, Xcel, and the Boulder Chamber to make sure that the right message, the more accurate messages, are getting out as quickly as possible to prevent any sort of human safety issues, but also to ensure that businesses don't have to close their doors before they have to, that people don't need to leave their homes before they need to, or at all necessarily. And so be aware of those things. And if you're not getting those real-time updates, if you're not getting the accurate communication out there, that's something that we need to hear at the Boulder Chamber, because that is something that we can feed back to folks, because we need to figure out where the inaccuracies are coming from. And also we need to be able to address them in this new temporary reality that we're experiencing right now. Moving forward and this is what we're asking of Xcel and the PUC. And you've heard about this in the news, you've probably read about it yourself, but the grid hardening commitments that were made must be met along the timeline that was proposed and agreed to. And I'm going to pause there. We can take a breath and think about that for a second. But really, let's start with the base level of fulfill what was already agreed to on the timeline that was apportioned out. And if there are issues with that, that needs to be addressed quickly, expeditiously, in a way that is responsive and builds something more or better than what was originally envisioned within those commitments. Um, Vegetation management. This is something that, part of the reason of the power safety shutoffs is in part because of the wildfire risk. And if we can address some of those wildfire risks, let's do that. We have businesses that arborists that are ready to step up. We actually have an arborist group, believe it or not. If any of you are arborists, we actually have a group that meets regularly, not just on this issue, but on all issues facing vegetation management. And so let's use the resources that we have internally to be able to address this. And then the last point that I'll make is around timelines. Is we need to ensure that those are transparent timelines, and whether that's happening through the city franchise agreement, through the Public Utilities Commission, or through private industry, making those things clear and accessible to our residents and businesses. That is a priority that we've heard from our business community that we are going to continue to advocate on. Um, what else do we need to see around infrastructure? In the medium term, what are the current mitigation gaps? What was not envisioned? And where is it that we can move to ensuring that that funding gets put in place to do those things? Now, whether that is through the existing tax structure that we have, whether it's through other public or private financing mechanisms, we need to get the price tag, figure out what it is that we're missing, where it is, and then start to find those funding sources and bundle them as quickly as possible to get to what those mitigation gaps are. And we're working with folks and I should say we're having conversations with and hope to be working with folks not just at the PUC, but also through our other sources to be able to close those gaps. And I'll talk about the PUC in just a second here. So short-term business solutions. So if you are a business, I can tell you during the previous power safety shutoff, I was sitting at a coffee shop. A restaurant owner hurriedly walks in, caffeinating themselves, and I asked them, what's going on? They're like, I'm finding a refrigerated truck right now, Jonathan. I'm going to go move some food as quickly as possible. What is it that we can do in the short term to work with refrigerated truck companies, places that are able to use backup generators? Can we use existing resources within our within our purview to be able to provide those backup generators, temporarily powered office spaces? These are the things that we're hearing from our business community that we are providing responses for in the meantime. And I promised after I get through these slides, I will get to the questions and the comments. I I like to pretend that I can parallel process, but truth is no one can. You can only process very quickly, but it's also 6 o'clock. So I am watching that carefully. Don't feel like I'm blowing past you. I'm just giving portioning the time as time passes here. Um, so in the waning moments here before I do go to the Q&A, I really want to focus on what the core central message is from the Boulder Chamber perspective is there's a difference between reacting and responding. When I see a crisis, when I'm in a crisis, the likelihood of me reacting is pretty high, of any of us reacting, right? When your house is on fire, your first response might not be the smartest response, might not be the healthiest response, right? It's your nervous system telling you something that there's a danger and it needs to be addressed right away. But this is why in first aid training they have the common saying, right, is check, call, care, right? And if you can ingrain that into your system, you realize, okay, am I in danger right now? Can I remove myself from the danger, make the phone call, and then provide care for people once I'm safe? And you know what? I don't want it to sound dire, but this is about public safety as much as it is about economic vibrancy. But this is the same idea, is instead of reacting, how do we respond? How do we formulate a strategy where we get down to the core symptoms and create short, medium, and long-term solutions that create the resiliency required to be able to be able to move forward? And so this is what I've told Excel, and this is what I've told many of our community members is reliability and affordability are of utmost importance. Within that context, you can't have reliability and affordability without resiliency. And so this is real business resilience that goes beyond these short and medium term solutions. And so some of the things that we have been advocating for is burying power lines where it is feasible, looking at microgrid options and opportunities, putting in guardrails for any new opportunities where we're ensuring that we meet the power demand and power load requirements as we see new technology demands hitting our community. And then, first and foremost, where commitments have been made, ensuring delivery on those, and then building from that to ensure that people have what was promised to them, so we can build the trust required to move forward in a way that really provides the infrastructure necessary to build to build the community that we all imagined, to get to a point where we do have affordability and reliability within that context. So, apart from our address and the moniker information here, I'm going to put in the webinar chat my cell phone number and my email address. And then as I close with my comments, I will just say thank you for affording me the opportunity to share this with you. Um, if we had all the answers, we wouldn't be here right now. We would just give you the answers, and it would be a much shorter PowerPoint probably. So I'm going to look at the Q&A. Chris, are you helping to moderate here? Just a
Yeah,
friendly.
just a couple of things, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Not everybody has access um, to the chat, but we can put your information on our website so
Ah,
people can have that.
excellent. Please feel free to. That is my
Great.
cell phone number. And what I'll say is do not hesitate to text. I get about 1 to 300 emails a day. I get about 20 to 40 phone calls a day. I get about 5 to 15 text messages a day. And so you can literally text and just say, "Hey, I was at the Empower Our Future thing, and I want to talk to you about, I'd love to ask you about this or hear about this." And so hopefully we'll be able to answer some of these questions today. But for those questions that we don't have answers for, like I said, we have a pretty robust team in our economic vitality department that is working closely with Excel. They weren't able to be here today, but you've got me, and you've got my commitment to get you the answers that we can find. So anyway, Chris, do I get to read these out, or do you?
Yes, if you could read them out so they could get on the recording, that would be great.
Absolutely. And do you want me to name the person that it's coming from, or do we want to respect people's privacy here?
Your call.
All right. So first caller, longtime listener, is James. James is asking, we are looking at long-term solutions. Have you heard about our EOF's Community Energy Resilience Team? Work with CU and the city on exploring a supplemental utility option called a sustainable energy utility. We envision this to be community oriented like Ann Arbor's model. We've seen your report. Our CU team would love to discuss it with you. That's great. The short answer is I have not looked at this, and so I would be more than happy to connect you with our team, and whether I'm there or whether it's a group of us there, we would love to be able to participate in that conversation with you. And like I said, all options are on the table. I will say that we recently looked at some of California's solutions, and I can't say that we have anything specific yet, but we are putting together a research compendium of options and ideas, and this is really what I was hoping to get here. And James, thank you for the follow-up there about saying that you've testified before the PUC on Boulder's estimated value of the lost load, or the best estimate that Xcel uses for calculating direct costs, mostly businesses based on Xcel and the Boulder's dollars per average customer minutes of outage. Uh, Boulder, based on number of residential and non-residential buildings, lost somewhere between 40 and 50 million in 2024's outage events. 2025 is likely similar, if not worse. I would love to see how we can refine those estimates for making better investment decisions for both Boulder and its businesses and our grid overall. This is exactly what we're talking about as well. And we, I mean, the businesses that I've discussed this with is, look, if the value proposition is really around this is what the cost is today, then there must be numerous opportunities to address where these hardening opportunities are and how we can invest in them. If 40 to 50 million dollars does not go fast, and it should go towards building resiliency rather than money that we're all eating based on climate change and the existing circumstances that we're facing. All right. Next question. Alan, I see you're asking, can you speak to the adoption rate of home business batteries in Boulder County uh, during the last, uh, I'm going to edit here, during the last the years, I'm going to say during the last years, particularly since the preemptive shutdowns of power during the last year. So I try not to edit the comments here, but it looks like the main thrust of this question is, uh, I don't have specific numbers on the adoption rate. I can say that anecdotally, and I'd be happy, once again, this is being recorded, so I'm happy to get you the notes on this. Um, Anecdotally, we saw an incredible jump after the shutoff last year. I'm sure, and I'm not making light of this, but I'm sure McGuckins and others were. This is not why they want to be making money, but they saw a considerable jump in understanding what the at least short-term reality is right now. And so it's there. I'm guessing there might be a follow-up question there around, well, what can we do to actually build in infrastructure, more battery storage opportunities that are decent or not decentralized, but centralized in a way that actually help everybody, not just the people that can afford their own storage system. So that is, you are not the first person to ask that question. It's more than something that we have heard from multiple people. Um,
Jonathan, oh,
yeah.
sorry.
So go
Yeah,
ahead,
there are a
Chris.
couple
Yeah.
of things that have come in through the uh, through other channels. First off, a little feedback about Excel's communication for this past week's outage. My power in South Boulder was out for 9 hours Thursday with no contact from Excel. Other neighbors received 3 incorrect power resumption texts throughout the day. On Saturday, I received emails that I would have no power, but there were no outages.
Yeah, well, no, and
Mm,
and thank you for pointing that out. I think that
mm,
that is in the chat. I'm going to actually stop the share so we can just look at each other now. But as that has emerged, by the way, I now live in Boulder. I've moved to Boulder, and so I'm personally experiencing many of the things that were discussed there, and it was. I'm going to capture that information about the 9 hours on Thursday,
mm.
and I will tell you, I'm happy to get you uh, directly in contact with Excel, and so please use my email address, and I will put that also. It's just jonathan.singer at boulderchamber.com, but I'll put that in the chat as well to the hosts and panelists. And if you just want to put in the subject line there. Um, power safety shutoff,
Mm.
um, I will know exactly where it needs to go and make sure those lines of communication happen. Um, I will say, as I share in not just the anxiety and frustration, but also just the I think surprise and shock that a lot of us felt, and so and also I know that the folks at Xcel have been very responsive to me and getting me the answers that we've seen, and now is the time to do it,
Mm.
um, because there is not an existing situation today. So let's get through those together. And that's my commitment to those of you who are on this right now.
Okay, here's
Yeah.
another question. In an opinion column in the Daily Camera back in February, the grid specialist Cameron Brooks talked about various ways to reduce fire risks and protect the community during shutoffs. He pointed out that burying electric lines can be very expensive, up to $9 million per mile. He suggested that in some situations it might be more efficient and effective to use that money to deploy batteries and microgrids to keep the electricity flowing. Have the Chamber's conversations with Xcel covered ideas like this?
Thank you. You put it better than I did, actually. And so yes is the short answer. This is something that we've discussed with Xcel and also our CD2 consumer advocate through the Public Utilities Commission has been really great at his outreach as well. And that's why I say, burying power lines where economically feasible, because there may be other opportunities that maybe other people aren't aware of that could provide faster solutions that could, um, you know, um, be just as effective or similarly effective and more deployable in a faster time frame.
Mm,
So thank you for bringing it up. You actually, like I said, you put it better than I did.
great, thanks. Here's another question. You may have not seen this in the Q&A. What grid hardening commitments have been made?
Thank you for asking that. So the grid hardening commitments, and I'm glad you made that term just bright line clear there. The commitments really have been on the front of upholding what was in the original franchise agreement. Additional commitments are still that picture is still on the table. And that I don't actually see that as a bad thing right now because I think we need to be gathering the feedback and then appropriately pushing in the right places. So as new things bubble up, as new questions bubble up, I want to make sure that I am capturing this feedback to get it back to the Public Utilities Commission and Xcel, so we can right size those things and prioritize them.
Okay, thank you. Um,
I'm seeing another question here, and Chris, I thought it was you because you're like, I want to get a word in, but don't know. So I see Steve here. What do you think is the top priority in reducing losses to Boulder businesses? I I'm actually letting that one sit for a second. I think the top priority uh, ultimately is building in the resilience required to avoid these shutoffs in perpetuity. Um, Now that's a long-term goal, right? And so that's why I think what we're trying to do is parallel process as much as possible. And different businesses are experiencing different needs at the same time. The example around the refrigerated trucks, our restaurants were hit really hard. I also realize that they advocate incredibly well for themselves. But we found, like I said, some refrigerated truck companies that are willing to work very inexpensively, affordably, I'll say, maybe not inexpensively, but affordably, especially compared to the losses that were provided. We're also having conversations with the Division of Insurance and insurance companies about some of the losses that have occurred and saying, certain people feel like they were promised a, certain, compensation, but, if you really read not even the fine print, but the plain print, this is not something that is reimbursable through the insurance that was purchased. How do we make sure that not only the information gets out there, but if there are new insurance options required, how do we build that into the process? You hear from some of the downtown businesses. We have, are there battery storage and solar opportunities with all of the rooftops, parking lots where rooftops aren't being used? Could we put certain battery storage in some of those spots that really aren't being used by either the public or city vehicles because of decreased parking that we see in certain areas? And so it is really hard for me to say that there is a top priority other than the ultimate end goal. But it is doing a lot of that parallel processing of figuring out where we can go. So let's see here. And it looks like a follow-up from Steve is Boulder Chamber supporting Xcel compensating residents and businesses for losses related to power shutoffs. I'll say at this point, we don't have a we don't have a direct position on that. What we are saying is that Xcel needs to partner with everybody on finding solutions, and that we are working with Xcel. Is they did have at one point some funds available for some individuals, but there hasn't been a hard and fast. Honestly, there isn't a hard and fast thing saying dollar for dollar you need to compensate residents and businesses for every loss that's incurred.
Right. And Paul
Oh,
has a
go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, well, Paul has a question. I think you can see it there. Maybe read it
Oh,
out loud.
there we go. Yes, Paul. Thank you for letting me test my bifocals here too. Xcel Colorado's president, in conversation with legislators in January, was emphatic that Xcel is not going to reimburse losses stemming from a power safety shutoff. Does the chamber think this is fair? This is one of those things where um, the entire situation, and I don't mean to make light of this, the entire situation is unfair. And ultimately, as a member-based organization, we want to give everybody their fair shake. Um, I think, so I'm trying to avoid putting my saying I think, but I'm going to say what the Boulder Chamber thinks, and by virtue of that, uh, what I'm going to tell you is that the status quo is not acceptable, and that we need to figure out how to um, quantify these losses and not have them happen in the future. And if you want to bring Xcel on board here, and if they haven't responded to you, I'll work to bring them with me next time on those things.
So there are really two parts to this next question. One has to do with the business environment, since Boulder is, as we know, very windy and very dry, and has been prone to wildfire risk. Does that put a crimp on the attractiveness of Boulder for new businesses? And that's the first part. And then the second part, I don't know if there are any grants or money available nationally to start. I don't know what it would be, pilot projects or ways to um, deploy batteries or microgrids to help a business community.
We're sure. Well, I was going to answer the second part first, but I would go with the first part first, and then you may have to remind me of the second part before I, move on. But for first things first, as it relates to businesses, um, I will say we have a relocation guide at the Boulder Chamber. We help businesses who want to relocate here. I will say that I have not heard from many that wildfire risk component to it. I think that a lot of people have forgotten about what happened just a couple of years ago, and the billions of dollars of losses that were incurred over the Marshall Fire. And I think people look at very pretty mountains and they look at an R1 research institution, and if anything, their biggest question is probably about the cost of housing more than anything else, and whether or not their workforce can afford to live here. But if we see additional fires, if we see additional natural disasters, that may change. That may change. Just like I'm sure, people along the Mississippi, there are questions about flood and drought, right? And so these are natural disasters are not unique to Colorado, but maybe the nature of those disasters may be. And now you're going to have to remind me of the follow-up question.
That question had to do with um, grants or monies available for businesses, communities to try out some of these battery or microgrid operations.
Yeah, well, I will say first of all that we have been on the forefront of preserving NCAR, NREL, NOAA, all of those federal labs, and are now seeing this lawsuit that just was recently levied. Um, and so all this to say that our federal government has not been particularly helpful in helping us find grant dollars for these things in this moment. That being said, one of the questions that we've asked is, and we're talking to folks at the city like, Jonathan Cohn to say, we also have this cap tax, climate action plan tax. How can we leverage some of those dollars, maybe potentially bundle those with options at the state? How can we look at, if we don't have grants at the state level, which is always been the case. What are we doing around tax credits? And this is considerably more challenging in a non-Tabor refund year. If we get a Tabor refund, it's going to be very close to not much. And so the state has always been reluctant to give out grants because of Tabor and our balanced budget amendment. But the story is different, looks very different when we talk about tax credits and what those tax credits do in terms of providing that return on investment. So we're certainly, there's actually a bill being proposed right now that's going to look at how we might want to redo some of those tax credits given the current fiscal environment. None of them point directly to what you're saying, although some of them are tangential. And it's everything from continuing investments in electric vehicles to to looking at providing additional opportunities for middle class, middle income folks to be able to afford to use alternative transportation methods. So it's a long answer to a short question is I don't think we have
Mm.
the federal government on our side right now. Um,
Okay.
and I will say this, I'm not just reaching out to our favorite congressperson, Jonah Goose, but saying the word Boulder in Washington, D.C. right now, in Boulder, Colorado, is not very helpful. It used to be just Boulder was anathema, but now we see, Donald Trump just removed his endorsement of Congressional District 3 Congressperson Jeff Hurd because Jeff Hurd was fighting him on tariffs.
Mm.
Lauren Boebert is almost persona non grata.
Mm.
And so now out of our 8 congressional districts, we are in many ways relying on the 5th congressional district with Jeff Crank right now. And I will say, like, all that to say that if we talk about resiliency, natural disaster, and national security protection, this is a message that we can carry. And my old joke and so it is something I'm advocating for. The old joke that I used when I was testifying at the legislature last year is, I would introduce myself and say I'm from the Boulder Chamber, and I said I know I lost half of you when I said Boulder and the other half when I said Chamber, but maybe that's important now to hear why this is coming from Boulder values, but from a business perspective,
Mm.
and that works in Colorado at the federal level today, that is challenging to say the least, which is why you're
Mm.
seeing lawsuits being levied to avail ourselves of justice through the judicial process rather than the legislative or executive process.
Mm,
I'm equally hopeful that's going to change.
okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
Here's a question about the distribution system hardening. Concerning the distribution system hardening plans and funds, what procedures have been put into place to transparently ensure and confirm, in other words, some kind of verification that the system is actually being repaired and upgraded? This questioner says, I'm a little frustrated because the power lines where I live are underground, so don't understand why the system hasn't been fixed since last April's first public service power shutoff.
I might have to ask a clarifying question, and I may have just missed it there. So, are you saying that your lines were de-energized even though they were undergrounded lines? Is that what I'm getting
I
there?
think that's what the questioner is saying. Maybe she can clarify it.
And I'll give it a beat, and I'm going to give you my best guess, best assumption, and like I said, I can feed this back to Excel as well. I would say, one of the things that your lines may be undergrounded, but be attached to a node that was not yet
Hmm.
fully undergrounded. That is my best educated guess based on this. And I hope that I'm even close to being right on that one.
So this questioner said that her power went out every time.
Hmm. Well, like I said, let's dig into that one together. Because my actual hope is that I'm wrong and that it was erroneously shut off. I will tell you, we heard numerous times from people like, why was my power shut off, but my neighbor's wasn't,
Hmm.
right? And it just happens to be where those different nodes are, and so it's not that someone doesn't like you, or even that it was by accident. But sometimes it does look a little funny when your neighbor is in one place and you're in a very literal and figurative dark place.
Hmm. Here's another question. What are you hearing from businesses about what actions they are taking in respect to these events? You mentioned a little bit about people contracting with refrigeration trucks, but what else? What have you hear? What do you hear?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of what businesses are doing, and Chris, thank you for doing this so I can focus on answering the questions. But what we're hearing from businesses is it is across the board. It really is very dependent on what business you're talking about. So battery storage generators are being purchased at a much higher rate. People are having much more in-depth conversations with their insurance companies than they've ever had or hoped to ever. Um, and also, they are a louder voice in advocating for change. And I will say, just from a policy perspective, because that's my role here. Um, and I'm describing it, not excusing it or supporting it. A lot of the frustration from the business community has been towards the city rather than Excel. And I'm literally describing it rather than editorializing one way or the other. But it is. I will say from a personal standpoint, it is very interesting that the frustration sits there. I can try and guess as to why, but that's where a lot of the heat has been directed as I have seen it from our community. And so from an advocacy standpoint, the folks are getting much more organized. They're getting louder, which is a good thing. And so in many ways, I'm hopeful that that is going to also exact some change and force some very hard, much needed conversations.
Hmm. There's a comment from one of the questioners that says substations that have been identified as needing repair or replacement have not been replaced since the beginning of these issues.
I have heard the same thing, and so on that front, it is something. Thank you for saying it. First of all, it's something I will continue to feed back up to Excel and to the powers that be. because those seem like are a priority, need to be a priority if they haven't been prioritized. And if there, once again, if there are specifics within that context, the more feedback that you can give me, Nick Cole with Xcel has been very responsive in getting me answers. And if there are answers that are incomplete, we work to fill in those blanks together. So, it said, thank you for your service to this community. You can stop talking now. Thank you for your service to this community. You're welcome. And yeah, the service does not end at 7 p.m. My recent Xcel bills have gone up dramatically, particularly driven by their new triple rates from and the correction 5 p.m. to 9 a.m. Um, I also was interviewed by CPR during the 4-day PSPS. In that interview, I was frank about the amount of emotional stress I experienced during that 4-day outage. I also at one time lived in the Pacific Palisades, and in reading Firestorm, and I believe we need a comprehensive review of how our town proceeds into the future and who our energy provider is. My question is this: is the Boulder Chamber to a very frank examination about what energy alternatives we have to Xcel Energy, particularly public energy companies? So I'm glad you asked the question. So, preceding my time here at the Boulder Chamber, this is a lifetime ago before COVID, there was the question of the municipalization. And, it's interesting having lived in Longmont and under through a municipal utility, I can speak to my experiences there and where the customer, frustrations and satisfaction was. What I can also say is that at the same time that I was living there, there was this debate. We have a policy committee called our Community Affairs Council. They meet monthly, and it's my job to convene them. And it is about as broad-based a group as is the Boulder Chamber. And so we have nonprofits, sole proprietors, Google. Xcel does not sit on the Community Affairs Council. I will double check just to make sure. But they had previously had a seat there. In full transparency, they are one of our board directors. And so when we are talking about Xcel and making votes, we ask them to recuse themselves. They totally understand that they need to recuse themselves in those circumstances. So we would, if there was something coming to the ballot where there needed to be a conversation around this again, we would take that issue up just as my predecessors took up the issue of municipalization, brought it to our, previous Community Affairs Council, and where our board, where Xcel was not sitting on that board at that time, they did vote to not support municipalization at that time. But to be frank about it, it was a very tough conversation, very emotional conversation. And I don't mean that pejoratively, but people were very passionate about this. And some of our members were very frustrated with the position we took, and some of them were frustrated. We would have been frustrated if they hadn't taken a position at that time. So the short answer is yes, but I also wanted to give you the context as well, because I think discounting any option would be giving our community, including our business community, short shrift.
Hey, there's one here from Merrill.
Oh, there it is. All right, Meryl, thank you. Thanks for speaking with us. My question from a long history with Xcel: they talk a good line, but only take action based on their internal calculations, which involves slow walking in areas they are not inclined to support. With burying lines at 9 million a mile, referring to the earlier question, what commitment is the chamber expecting for developing and deploying microgrids and battery storage? Not discussion, but commitment. Uh, and once again, in full transparency, the commitment is to more than just discussion right now. But I can't tell you this is where we want to see the microgrid deployment and how quickly and the what, the where, the when, the why. What I am saying is that we are taking an extraordinary and deserved amount of time between myself on the policy level, but also our folks through the from our economic vitality department to gather the required feedback necessary to figure out the when, the where, and the how quick. And so any information provided right now is super welcome. I mean, we want to be getting the feedback and providing the best information possible, because we don't want to make a commitment to something that is overly expensive and slow. And we also don't want to give anyone the idea that this is going to be a cut rate service. And so it's part of why you not hearing the Boulder Chamber saying, well, we need to bury all our power lines in the next 12 months. We know even if we asked for that, I don't know how we would get that. At the same time, this is why I'm glad that I was, asked to be here and be present for this conversation today.
Great. There's one more question in the
Mm.
Q&A, but before we do that, I just want to clarify that Excel's most expensive time is from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Friday. I
Thank
think
you.
that was maybe a little not clear in the previous conversation. Okay, great. So a question from James Gilbert.
Thank you, James. Yeah, I see this here. So I've heard that there have been failures in some undergrounded facilities. Undergrounding is no guarantee of reliability. Contact the city. I will contact the city about that and hear more about that. I'm very interested in understanding that as well. Um, I think we've seen this in Europe and other places, but we also know that Longmont wasn't experiencing the same kind of power safety shutoff situations that Boulder was. And so I think there are many ways to get to the same answer.
Mm.
Um, I'll just editorialize real quickly and just say, with undergrounding, I think most people would be like, well, it would help increase the view and make this a even prettier place to live, which would, create a more valuable, greater value proposition. So I don't even mean that in jest, but the, aesthetics, do take is part of why we moved here with this picture in my background. So.
Mhm.
Other questions that we
I
can
think
help?
we're pretty much close to the end and close to the end of our time um, with the Empower Hour. I think I'll just thank you on behalf of all of us at Empower Our Future and for the community for your work here and previously in the legislature, and turn it back to Mary.
Great. Thank you, Chris. And thank you so much, Jonathan. I appreciate that you are threading a needle of sorts in your role. Uh, and again, as Chris said, we thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I also want to just take a moment. There's a slide I think Paul will pull up. We're encouraging everybody to check out ChargeBug. When you use electricity matters. If you could choose clean power by shifting your electricity usage to times of high renewables, when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing, that actually could impact future resource planning. So we are very excited about ChargeBug. It is now an app available for iPhones. We are told the Android version will be out soon. And as you can see on the slide, there's a number of resources. The QR code will take you to the Apple App Store where you can download ChargeBug. And you could also learn more at sintoninstruments.com to look at the data that's used to create this forecast. ChooseRenewable.org is also a place where you can learn more. And for a deep dive, we'd encourage you to go to the Empower Hour with Dr. Ron Sinton that happened in December of 2025. And that'll be on our website at empowerourfuture.org/events. So I just want to wrap up by thanking my fellow Empower Our Future communications team members who are integral to making these Empower Hours happen. They are Paul Cullen, Chris Hoffman, Steve Whitaker, and Julie Zonizer. Thanks again to everybody for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me as well. I really appreciate the time and the consideration.